According to a source outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers from another NFL team, 49ers wide receiver Debo Samuel, who was granted a trade from the 49ers at the end of the season and will begin searching for teams interested in his market, will quote unquote absolutely be calling the Pittsburgh Steelers to engage their interest in a trade for the 29-year-old. Now, Debo is a conflicting character, I would say, to many who are looking for a wide receiver. He comes with, I think, massive upside because you get Debo on a good year and Debo's phenomenal. You get Debo on the last couple years, he's about as average as it comes and doesn't really add much excitement to your offense or take away much attention from guys like George Pickens or Calvin Austin or whoever else that you have in the mix. At the same time, he would cost just $15 million. We don't know what a trade would cost for the Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of compensation, but you'd have to imagine that it'd be maybe a fourth-round pick for Debo Samuel for a 29-year-old. I don't know if you're getting much higher than that. Maybe another team will be willing to pay higher than that. I don't think the Steelers would necessarily be looking at Debo Samuel and say, we'll give up a fourth-round pick. At the same time, in the same conversation, the Steelers did ask about Debo multiple times last year in the conversations with the 49ers about acquiring Brandon Ayuk, which means that they do have some level of interest. But the 49ers star will call the Steelers as these early conversations begin and definitely has interest in coming to Pittsburgh if that is how things shake out. I don't know if I'm a proponent of Debo Samuel. I think you could do better than Debo, and that's no disrespect to Debo. I think he lands somewhere and continues to play a role and is a starting wide receiver in this league, or at worst, a number two, like three, I guess, if you have three starters at wide receiver. But I do think the Steelers could do better. I do think names like Cooper Kupp emerge much higher than Debo Samuel. I think that if you are going to shoot for the stars, you could do much better than a trade package for a guy who's 29 years old, who's dealt with some injuries, who hasn't really had a blowout successful season in 2, maybe 3 years. And right now could be on the back half, is probably most certainly on the back half of his career where you're getting him. I don't know if that would be a move I'd make, but he is interested in Pittsburgh. I texted this to you yesterday, so I'm sure that there's some thoughts there. What are they?
Yeah, of course, a lot of people are going to look at this as the Steelers getting a cheaper price tag for a star wide receiver because they're going to look at the name Debo Samuel and they're immediately going to kind of tie that to what Debo was whenever San Francisco was making their Super Bowl run, specifically the one back in 2020. But the problem with that is Debo Samuel isn't that type of player anymore. The way I look at this is you're slightly overpaying a declining asset in Debo Samuel. He is a still 2 times, 3 times better version of Cordero Patterson, where you could use him as a number 3 running back if you want. I'd certainly rather have him in those situations than Patterson, but I do agree with you that he's down lower on the list. $15 million and a lower acquisition cost makes me a little bit interested. If he knows that he's a number 2, that also makes me a little bit more interested. But again, I'm not quite sure if he knows that yet. I'm not quite sure he doesn't look at himself and say, hey, I'm still Debo Samuel that was looked at as one of the most electrifying players in the NFL, because if he thinks that of himself, he's just going to get upset when he comes to Pittsburgh because he's not that guy anymore. And I don't think he's ever going to be that guy anymore. You mentioned that if you get him on a good year, then he's electrifying. He's great. I just don't know if he has that left in the tank. If you're looking at a number 2 wide receiver, if you want to overpay for a guy that he's a true 2, I think Debo Samuel should be among your top 5. But if you're looking to actually get a bona fide 1A, 1B to put next to George Pickens, especially with the future for Pickens being so uncertain at the moment, I think there are better options. We talked about T. Higgins. If you go and swing for the fences, he's obviously number 1, but some people aren't comfortable putting up 30+ million for a guy like T. Higgins. And I think if you want to go number 2 for an aging veteran, I think Cooper Kupp leads the charge on that list. I think Debo is a couple rungs down after that.
I 100% agree. Look, if you want to go add Debo Samuel and say this is the beginning, he's a running back / wide receiver, we'll use him as a utility piece, but that's all he's going to be. He's going to replace Cordero Patterson, and Van Jefferson and just be kind of utilized everywhere, there's an argument to be made. I'm not going to say I'm on board with it, but there's an argument to be made. But that comes with you still need another wide receiver. Chances are you still need two. Like Debo does not mean that you could go into the NFL draft somebody and say, that's our group, is George Pickens, a rookie, and Debo Samuel. The upside there is great. The downside is you are in a very bad spot midseason, and you learn that Debo was not close to enough to make the difference between moving forward and staying where you are. And I get it. Debo Samuel is way better than Van Jefferson. I'm not going to disagree with that one, but it still doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get the boost, the input, or the impact, any of that, than you would if you went a different direction. And that's my argument. I think that's just like you said, that's the biggest argument here. Cooper Kupp, if you could get him for remotely close to that $15 million mark, is probably going to cost you less in a trade and is going to have a bigger impact because Cooper Kupp's a better player. He still is. When he's healthy, he is a better option to have on the field than Debo Samuel. And because of that, I don't know if Debo is on my list. Like he probably is. I mean, everybody's on my list. Amari Cooper is on my list, but it doesn't mean that they're not low. It doesn't mean that I'm not saying draft early, maybe double dip in the draft early, go and get Cooper Kupp, go sign T. Higgins, go shoot for the stars with some younger names that might emerge. Go try to get Christian Kirk if that's the direction you're going to go. And I just think there are other options before I'm sitting here going, Debo Samuel is the name I'm looking for and the name that could change things for the Steelers. I don't think that that's where that move takes them, and that's where it needs to. The Steelers can't make a deal or make an addition to their wide receiver room this offseason outside of the NFL draft and not have that addition be something where you're going, that's a step forward. It's a big one. It's a big step forward. I think Cooper Kupp is a decent step forward, and if he could stay healthy, is a big step forward. I don't know if Debo falls in that same category to me. I think he might be a little bit lower.
Yeah, and I mean, just if you're going to compare those two as your options, look at what they are when they're at their best. Cooper Kupp is a guy that can be shifty and get open in the middle of the field because he's an elite route runner. If you can get that out of Cooper Kupp, then that is a dimension to this offense that hasn't been there for multiple years, not just this past year. Debo Samuel is a guy who, at his best, was a get him the ball in space and he's going to truck people because he's fast and he's physical, and not a lot of DBs can actually handle that. Well, the speed has gone away a little bit. The physicality takes a hit after you do that for so many years. I think you're going to take a bet on one of them to be able to get to their game more at the age of 29 or at the age of 30, or I believe Cooper Kupp's a little bit over the age of 30.
31.
I'm trusting Cooper Kupp more in that aspect, not to mention, I mean, how much does Arthur Smith put an emphasis on run blocking for wide receivers? That's why you look and you see, oh, okay, Van Jefferson was on the field a lot. Why? Because he can run block way better than Calvin Austin. If you get a guy like Cooper Kupp in, he can do both, and you don't have to have such specialized packages. I understand that it's probably not going to get fully taken away, but it's going to be utilized less, which goes to help the Steelers not be as predictable on offense.
Yeah, look, I 100% agree. That's why they were going after Brandon Ayuk, because at the end of the day, he fit everything that they're looking for. I think Cooper Kupp, I don't know if you're putting Cooper Kupp on the field and saying, hey, dude, block for Najee Harris 20 times a game. I don't know if that's the move that I foresee coming, but I still think that you look at those options first. This fits the offense, and Cooper Kupp does fit the offense. Like, Debo's a guy that he comes in here, he's a playmaker when healthy, if you get him at his best. But there are times where he's going to fade away, where defense can almost ignore him. You're not going to get that with Cooper. If Cooper's on the field, defenses have to pay attention to him. And to be honest with you, Cooper's going to come with 2 years left on his deal. Debo comes with 1. Chances are, at 29 years old, he's not going to get traded and say, I'm coming to Pittsburgh for a 1-year deal and then I'm going to hit the market. He's looking for an extension. And you're not going to sign Debo Samuel to an extension. That's why he wants out of San Francisco. He doesn't want out of San Francisco because Brock Purdy stinks. No, the 49ers, when healthy, are a Super Bowl contending team. Debo wants out because he wants money, and he understands this is probably his last significant deal in the NFL. The Steelers should not be willing to pay that. They should not. And I think it's too big of a risk. Debo, in my eyes, I understand the interest from his side. I understand where things are going. I understand that Debo with George Pickens and Jalen Warren, and if you got crazy with it, Ashton Genty and Justin Fields could be one wild offense. It could also be a very bad offense. So I don't think I'm on board with Debo. I don't think many people are, but he does have interest in the Pittsburgh Steelers. He will, quote unquote, absolutely be calling him and his agent over the next, I would imagine, couple of days, and they'll engage and see where things go from there.